Hello everybody, in this video we are gonna have a talk about functions and methods. Functions and methods are self-contained pieces of code. They are usually routines or tasks that you want to isolate from your code, just to make it more clean and more readable. The syntax of a method and a function are actually the same. So you might be thinking, okay, what is then the difference between a function and a method? Technically, they are the same. So the difference with functions is that they can live outside of a class. Methods are usually part of a class and they are referenced by the this keyword. We will talk more about classes later, so don't mind that for now. We'll see this in a different video. Now, if you want to have an example of a function, we can have a look here at the main function. As you see, there is no class around this. This is just living on its own. For further explanation of functions and methods, let's just say that they are the same and we are referring to the same thing. So first, let's have a look at the structure of a function. In the beginning, you see here void. Void actually means that this function isn't returning anything. Let's write a different function to get an understanding of what a function with a return type would look like. We'll start with double. So this is a type, and we are expecting our function to return a double value actually. Let's call our function calculate price. So this will be the name of our function. And now between these parentheses we are going to pass a parameter. A parameter is an input for our function. Let's say that we are gonna give it the parameter a double named price. Then we need some curly brackets like this, and to finish this function it should also do something, and it should actually return a value because we said it would be returning a double value. So let's write return, and we are going to use our parameter price and we're going to multiply this with 1.2 like this. So this is our function, and if we want to use the function, let's just remove this code here. We can just call it calculate price, and we're gonna give it a number for a parameter like this. Now we are also gonna add a print around that, just so we get something in our console here. So let's run this code, and as you can see, 100 is passed to our function. The percentage 1.2, it's multiplied with this, and we get the result of 120. So this is a basic example of a function. As I said before, void, this means that the main function doesn't return anything, right? Something else what you can have is that a function can also return a null value. And if that's the case, then you should add a question mark here. So this means that this function can actually return a null value. Null safety, it's something that we also are gonna discuss later in the videos. Keep in mind that when you do this, you also have to be sure to do something with the null value, because this can cause errors in your code. Let's now have a quick talk about parameters. As I said before, parameters are the inputs for our functions. And here price is our parameter in this case. We have two types of parameters. We have optional and required parameters. I guess it's clear what that means. Next to that, the parameters, they can be named or positional. Let's look at some examples. Required positional parameters, that is something that we are gonna have a look first. So let's remove this question mark here, and I'm gonna add an extra parameter, double percentage, and instead of this value here, I'm gonna add percentage there, like this. All right, so price and percentage are now both required and they are positional. You don't need to pass the names of these parameters just as we did here. So when I want to do this like this, oh, there's something wrong here. There we go. So this is the same result. Now let's have a look at optional positional parameters. So when we change, for instance, when we add these around this parameter, this actually makes the percentage optional. Optional parameters, they should also be at the end. You first have the required parameters and then the optional parameters. Something else that you can do is add a default value to the optional parameter. That makes it a little more handy to catch things in your code. For instance, if you if this would be like a null value, which is also possible, if you do it like this, then it's a null value, then this will give an error saying that it can be 0 or null, and then you have issues. So how can you solve this? You can give it a default value. You can say, okay, by default this is 1.2. So if we would remove this here, then this function would still work, because it knows that the second parameter here is optional, and we have made sure that we have a default value. So if I run this code, we should get the same result, 120. So the last thing about these parameters, what I want to explain to you, is the named parameters. If you want to use a named parameter, then you should use the curly brackets. So if we replace this here with these type of brackets, then this is now a named parameter. So what does this exactly mean is when you want to call this function here, then you should add the name, as you can see here, percentage, and then you have to specify the value like this. And if I run it, we will get the same result. Keep in mind though that I didn't have an error when I didn't have this here. So if we would do it like this, it would also work. Why is that? Because named parameters by default are also optional. If you want to make them required, then you should add the required keyword here. And if I would run it now, it would say that we are missing the percentage parameter, the named parameter. So, and if we add it back here, I think we have a typo here. Oh no, okay, so it can't have default value if it's required. That makes sense. So we should remove this here, and then it will actually run again. There we go. Okay, so that's it about the parameters. Just to recap, we have the positional parameters, required, optional. We also have the named parameters, which we just had a look at. Now something else, a little more complex. Dart is a true object-oriented programming language. What does that mean? Functions, they're also just objects. So we can assign these functions also to variables, just as you would do with a string or with a numeric value. Let's have a quick look at what this exactly means. So let me just remove this code here. And we are gonna define a new function. We'll just call it, I'm gonna quickly create a new function here. Let's call it check prices, for instance. And we are gonna return this 99.99. Very simple. And now we are gonna define a variable, and we are gonna use the var keyword here, and this variable is gonna be called price checker. And instead of giving this a value, a numeric or string value or whatever, we are gonna pass this function to this variable. So I'm gonna write here check prices, and I'm gonna do it like this. So this means that whenever we call this variable, this function will actually be run. So we're gonna add a new variable here, price, and we are gonna call our variable that we just created, price checker. And then we are gonna print the price. Let's see if this works. We should see the value of 99.99. That's good. So again, real quick, we created a variable here of type var. We assigned our function to this variable, and then we created a new value and we called our variable, and this was acting as our function. It had reference to the actual function, and that's how we got the value here. So this is also something which you should keep in mind. At some point, you will need to have this information. The last thing that I want to discuss real quick is anonymous functions. So anonymous functions, they don't have a name, and they are typically also called lambdas. And a good example is, for instance, the for each function of a list. This is requesting us that we pass a function to the lambda, and in this example, for instance with the for each, the function will be called for every element in the list. Okay, let's look at an example so this will make more sense. First, we'll create a list, just a simple list, and we're gonna give it some values. I'm just gonna input some test data here. There we go, that's okay. And now we are going to iterate over this list. And we can do this with the for each function. And as you can see, it's looking for a function as a parameter. So we are gonna first get a handle of the value. So this value is gonna be the item which iterates over the list. And then with this notation, we want to have pass our function. I'm gonna print out our result, and we are gonna call calculate price, and we are gonna add our value here. Now something that we still need to do is define our function. So let's just copy this real quick here. There we go. And this is expecting a double price. There we go. And as a return, we're gonna say price. multiplied by 1.2. There we go. Let's run it, see if it works. That's very good. So let's go over this example real quick. We have a list here and we are going to iterate over every item in this list using this for each. And the item we have called it price, and we have passed our function calculate price to this lambda expression, and so the calculate price is going to be run against every price in this list, and that's how this works. This is something that you will see a lot in the code in the future. So alright, that's it for the functions and the methods. I hope it was very informative and I hope to see you in a next video. Thanks a lot, bye.